Namaste. Hi, I'm Bruce Benefiel, and welcome to One World. Welcome to this week's edition of One World. Namaste, of course, again, is a Sanskrit word. Simply means the divine in me recognizes the divine in you. Think what we could do if we could recognize that in each other and in the world around us. Think of the miracles that could happen. Anyway, this week's guests are Jamie McFerren, who is the host of the KTAR talk show, and Jim McConnell, who has a master's in counseling therapy. And with no further ado, I'd like to welcome them both. Jamie, Jim, glad to have you on the show.
Thank you.
Now, Jamie, what prompted you to do what you're doing in the field of broadcasting? Were there some things that kind of drove you to do that, or was it something that just happened?
Bruce, I think there are two agendas in life. There's my agenda, and then there's the universal agenda.
Okay.
And I truly got into radio out of the universal agenda. I was set on a path to be an actress, and an opportunity arose for me to explore radio. And so 15 years ago I started down that path, and when I originally thought I was going to go to New York City to work in radio and support myself and then audition and study acting in my spare time, successive jobs have taken me farther west, and I'm full-time in radio. So that's how it happened.
It's interesting. Now, what kinds of things, was there any fears that you encountered along the way? Because obviously, if your agenda was to be an actress and the universal agenda was to have you on radio, what kinds of adjustments did you have to make?
Well, I think there came a point in time, because I got into this as a career relatively late in life. You know, most people sort of come out of college and they know what they're going to do and they're on the path. I didn't start in this until I was in my 20s. And I think I was probably in broadcasting for 5 or 6 years before I realized I have a career. You know, it was no longer just a job and something I would do until my life got started, but that I had discovered something that was a great job, number one, and something that I loved to do, and something for which I had an affinity. Yes, yes. So I don't think I was ever frightened, which maybe is a good sign. You know, if what you're doing is fulfilling and satisfying,
comes naturally. Yes,
and is natural, and it's not fearful or fearsome, then I think you're on the right path. I certainly was. So far, anyway. So we'll not quit.
Really? Well, you've been doing a great job.
Thanks.
Jim, how about you now? What prompted you to do what you're doing? You do family and individual counseling and therapy, and then you've also are working on a process called multi-level awareness,
right,
which goes way beyond what traditional therapy is all about.
Well, not exactly. I can explain that.
What we're used to,
okay,
I think, in the norm.
Yeah, okay. Originally, after undergraduate school, I went into sales and kind of kicked around with that for about 6 years. And in that time, I realized that money just wasn't enough. I mean, it wasn't enough of a motivator for me. And I didn't know exactly what was at that point. But I kept searching, and finally the idea, however it came to me that I needed to go back for counseling. I originally had a psychology degree in undergraduate school, and decided I needed to go back for counseling. I did that, went back got my master's degree, and then from there did the traditional therapy, like you just said. And about 3 years ago, I kind of came across what you're calling new paradigm, new age, new paradigm. And kind of accidentally, I was running a group of teenagers, and however it happened, the conversation came around to life after death, what happens after death. And one of the kids there, he's about 17 years old, started talking about all these experiences that he had, which happened in Sedona, and there was an old man that came up to him that dressed in all white beard, white hair, the whole bit, and knew everything about him at the time. And it just sounded so intriguing to me, and I didn't know if I believed it or not, but I decided, to check into this kind of stuff a little bit further, and I'd start asking questions within myself, and little by little I got guided to answers that I was looking for, because I'd been questioning things a lot before that. And I came across finally a spiritual group that I've been attending now for about 3 years, called AUM. And in that group, tremendous things have happened, and one is the multi-level awareness was introduced to me, and it became a natural movement from counseling into using this technique. It's a tool to help people to get in touch with other levels of their being other than just their conscious selves. Get into the unconscious levels, get into the past life memories. Been able to do a lot of interesting and diverse things with this technique.
That's interesting, because it, as I understand it to be anyway, it's done fully conscious.
Yes.
Where you're just, guiding the person through, not necessarily telling them how to do it, but indicating, or in essence, leading them through the process and allowing them to do it on their own.
Right, that's correct.
I think that's, at least at this point in time, very valid, because it takes away the fear aspect from a person where they're in charge. They want to be in charge anyway, and you're enabling them to continue to be in charge and still be able to access those types of experiences where, if that were induced in another environment or something like that, it may have brought up a lot more fears and resistance to that.
Right, I'm simply a guide to take them, to the various levels that they want to get to. And
they actually do the work.
They do the work, right. And it is completely conscious, as you said.
Interesting. And now, Jamie, with broadcasting, how do you see that? Now, granted that with the people you work with, that's a very small segment of society. Do you see those people having the same type of experience that you've had, as far as it, kind of being led down the path into doing what they're doing? Or do you see a lot of strife with them working to be something or to get somewhere?
I see both. I see both. When I started in the business, women were brand new to it. And so there were no female role models. I don't know how the majority of women were feeling at the stage I went into the business, because there simply weren't other women around except in sales. They were not around on the air. So for secretarial help or in sales, yes, women were involved in broadcasting, but there were no other women on the air. So I don't know how it was for other women. Most of the men I started off with originally had fallen in love with the medium. They loved radio, which is my first medium. Later in television, there was more strife. I think there was more competition, more striving, more I have to beat you, really like in a foot race kind of thing. Now, that was my own experience, but I tell you, as honestly as I know how, while I was in television, that was the game that I was playing. I felt I had to compete. I don't know if it's true for other people. I can only tell you what I was experiencing at the time, and probably is the reason that I've not spent the majority of my time in television, that I've returned to radio.
Is it possible that by doing that, by feeling like you're striving, that you're pushing, that you remove yourself from the flow?
Oh, yeah,
so
absolutely.
that you're going upstream, which makes it harder to do, rather than being in an area where it just comes naturally.
Well, you just said something pretty interesting when you speak about Jim's work and leaving people in control. There's something very positive and very engaging about that. But there's a dark side to that too. And if you take on a career like I did. I sort of floundered into this thing, and it was going along beautifully, and then I decided, well, I'm going to be in control here. And as soon as I tried to sort of grab hold of it, life got uncomfortable. I turned into someone I didn't like very much. You know, someone who was nervous and tense and upset and like all the time concerned about, all right, what's going to happen next, and what's happening with that person, and why isn't it happening with me? So that was my experience. I loved the phrase that you used about people wanting to be in control. There are times when, yeah, that's natural, that you sort of have to own your own personality and you have to own your own history. But there's a danger, I think, sometimes, there was for me anyway, in grabbing too tightly the controls of the career vehicle,
right,
and ending up in a bank as a result of it.
Right, because you get into kind of a manipulation where you're trying to
all the
move
time.
and,
You're either trying to manipulate yourself, or manipulate your boss, or manipulate your audience, or it's like, I'm trying to make it happen. The ego or the identity gets in the way, and there's not much humanity in all of that.
True. How did you break out of that?
Robert Blake said something once a long time ago about being in a particular kind of therapy, and he talked about his therapist saying to him, you know, listen, why don't you leave a hammer by the side of your bed, and when you wake up in the morning, you can just hit yourself in the head with it a few times and get it over with for the day. I had an experience of life being so uncomfortable. My life simply got so uncomfortable that that the circumstances were not going my way, and it got to the point where you have to recover your sense of humor, or, you know, succumb, just kind of collapse into nothing. And I think I did a little of each.
I think it's a
yeah,
it's a dual purpose.
It's something that happens. You know, you will keep running the same play until you learn the lesson.
Yeah.
And so I guess I finally learned the lesson somewhere. You know, it got to the point where I lost a job, and it was actually a job that I had known for more than a year. I did not like. I wasn't happy. I was not fulfilling my purpose. I was not living up to my own standards of contribution in terms of the work, and I lost that job just at a time when I needed the income the most.
I can relate to that.
You know, we've all had those things, and I think there finally came a moment where I saw that truly I have a great job. I live in a fabulous place. You know, I live in Arizona, and after years and years of shoveling my way through winter to have the kind of winters and the glorious summer sunsets that we have here, I started to just count what I did have during that period of time of being unemployed, and really was forced into unemployment for 7 months because I had a non-compete contract. So I couldn't go anywhere else in the valley and get a job. I was also newly married to a man who had been here 20 years, so we weren't going to leave. My gypsy days were over. And
so you got a chance to relax and take it easy?
No.
No?
No, I struggled for much of that 7 months. I was going to make something happen. And there came a time when I had to start counting blessings in a different way, and counting sunsets and counting good weather.
So you were kind of forced to
give it up.
Relax a little bit. Yeah, to give it up and say, okay.
That's right. Exactly.
I think that we can all learn from that experience.
Well,
you
know what,
do.
Bruce, I think we can talk about it, and maybe that will open something for someone. But what I've just told you was not new information to me at the time. You know, it's sort of like you learn your lesson when you learn your lesson.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Well, a lot of people today are still trying to be in control. And they have so many different things coming at them from outside them that they nip and tuck and dive and weave, and they do everything that they can to enact what they feel they should do.
Oh, yes.
Rather than what their heart's telling them to do. I know that I had that problem. I'm sure you probably did, and Jim, you did also.
Oh, I still do.
Yeah, where we have this past programming from childhood that we feel like, okay, this is the way it's supposed to be. I'm supposed to grow up, get married, raise a family,
That's right.
have a nice home, ta-da, ta-da, ta-da. And it just, in today's world, seemingly doesn't work in that way when you try and do it how others tell you to do it. You have to give it up and do what resonates or is harmony with your own being. Jim, in what you've been doing with the multi-levels specifically, what kinds of fears do you see coming up? What kinds of fears did you see coming up in yourself, first of all? And then how do you see that fitting into the common experience with others?
Okay, well, in the very beginning, when I first started branching out from the typical counseling into this multi-level, I had a fear, whether I could even do this or not, if I could be an adequate guide for people, if I could help them in any way.
How about from the flip side of that, the experience of it? Did you encounter any fears there of opening up to it, to the possibilities that it was a viable process?
Oh, definitely. When I was first began the process myself with someone else guiding me, I was very skeptical when I first began with it. And I found through a various number of experiences that there is a lot of validity to it. For myself, I mean, it doesn't matter what anyone else thinks. It's what it is from within yourself.
Perception
matters.
is reality,
right?
No, regardless of who you are.
Right. So I had the basic fears of, whether I could guide anybody and do something for them, and I found that it's been a very good experience for a number of people, especially those with phobias, because where they would go for the normal counseling and go for the therapy hour every week for 3-4 months or something, for a lot of them that hasn't seemed to work. So if they come to me and I can use this tool to help them, they can go back and get in touch with the source of the phobia, whether it be this lifetime or even a past lifetime. And it doesn't matter whether they believe in past lives or not, they find that they're there. And, or at least some experience that feels right to them, that lets them know that, this is the source of this phobia. And then once we've had the source, then we're able to change the record, change the memory, so to speak.
Even if they imagine
get out of the unconscious.
something, whatever it may be, if their mind allows them to produce an event that enables them to work it out in their own mind, they release it and move on.
However it's released, it gets released, and that's the important thing.
Now, how do you see that type of thing enabling the building of a larger community, or of removing the fears and allowing a multicultural environment to evolve?
Well, basically, if the people can get over their basic fears for however way they do it, whether it's this technique or numerous other ones, numerous ways that they're able to overcome their problems, that can all go toward helping all the people that are working with them. As far as the multicultural,
I know I kind of threw that one in there with a twist, and because that's a different way of approaching that.
I'm not sure exactly what it is you're looking for with that, though.
I'm looking for what your perception of how this process, or addressing the fears, the phobias, so on and so forth, can enable the barriers that seemingly exist between cultures, that not only recognize differences, but stand in conflict with them, rather than recognizing them and honoring them. Do you see that this process, or those like that, allows that process to evolve to recognizing and honoring rather than being in conflict?
Yeah, if people are able to get over those basic fears and move toward levels of more confidence and things like that. They'll be able to work better with each other, recognize that we don't have to have judgments on everybody, that fundamentalism, things like that, very judgmental people, that we don't have to have that we're all one people.
Well, doesn't it begin with the person themselves, and what you do enables the person to release the judgment on themselves, first of all?
Helps them to find out, right, that they can have a love of themselves, that they can, once they get over their fears, the phobias, and so on, they can begin to feel better about themselves, to have some inner love, and then that can do a lot for them working with other people, getting along with others in society, and whereas before they may have been so afraid of, whatever. So.
Being in communications, Jamie, I know that there seems to be a vast diversity in your backgrounds, and there's method to my madness. With the broadcast industry, you're constantly affecting, in communication, you're constantly affecting how, or the mindset of the public. How do you see that in relation to removing or adding to the cultural barriers? First of all, do you see a lot of cultural barriers now?
I suppose we could make a case for cultural barriers. That's not what I go into the job looking for.
Right.
So when you ask me,
it naturally comes up, I'm sure.
Yeah, I think that there is, that we've generated how do I want to say this? We've generated a culture that thrives on duality. I'm right, you're wrong. Male, female. Black, white. Hispanic, black. We seem to want to go with a dual way of thinking and viewing whatever occurs in life. That's sort of the culture. That's our water, if you will.
Okay.
I think that one of the things that you spoke to in posing the question to me is something that I don't know if everybody in broadcasting yet owns, and that is that when we speak, whether it's on a camera or over a radio,
like Merrill Lynch.
Yeah, exactly. That people do listen, and that we're creating a culture every time we open our mouths, every time we read a news story, every time we tell an account of something, every time we share an opinion, that we're actually creating a culture. And you can go all the way back to, in the beginning was the Word. It's how we speak ourselves into existence. I don't know that the entertainment industry, the electronic entertainment industry, owns that entirely yet. I think we'd like to believe that we can say anything we want to and get away with it, that there's no impact, that there is no impact, that we're not designing anything, that we're not creating anything. So I think that makes the process a little slower in terms of being all-inclusive, in terms of living in a multicultural society with pure tolerance and recognizing the divine in each and every. I think it slows the process sometimes. But I also think that this show is evidence that the other side of that, the dual nature, once again comes into play. And it says, well, yeah, that may be true, but what's also true is that we can speak about this here and reach thousands, where if it were the three of us in our living room, it would be just the three of us.
Right.
So, I don't know if that answers your question, but that's what came to mind to say.
It does, and here's how I'm receiving that, is that with the broadcast medium, sure, it at times promotes the duality.
Yes.
However, the ultimate potential in that is the far greater good by being able to reach many more people.
Exactly. And if you look at the history of television, and if you look at the history of radio, you'll see that, yes, there's a downside. The truth is that terrorism would not exist in places like Gila Bend, Arizona, were it not for television.
Right.
They wouldn't have that. as a, quote, reality in our world. By the other side of that, the other side of that coin is there may also not be a sense of the dignity of people with AIDS, or the dignity of people with multiple handicaps, or just that there is a sense of inclusion in a greater world of all colors for a Gila Bend, Arizona, and that with that comes the price of the greater humanity, and that includes the dark side.
Of course. And the recognition of that.
Yes.
And then working to balance that out.
Exactly.
Because as we bring things up, we naturally think that we're bringing up the best side of it. However, by our own human nature, we are judgmental. We've been taught to be judgmental, and we're beginning to break through that and really pay attention to what Jesus said a long time ago is don't judge, condemn, or criticize unless you can walk in that person's shoes. Well, I can't walk in your shoes.
Right.
I'm not in your body. So why would I want to judge you? I know nothing about what's going on inside of you that promotes your action.
And even on a broader, if you look at each of us as some sort of microcosm of humanity, of the whole, you may not be able ever to walk in my shoes, but you can certainly get a sense of compassion for the children in Biafra who are starving.
Be very empathetic.
Exactly. And engaging in terms of having you be a part of a greater world.
Jim, real quick, what practical advice can you give? Short and sweet.
I would say, to quote an often used cliche these days, you can create your own reality, that you can do what you want, and that belief precedes the reality.
Great.
I'd say that.
Believe it and you can do it. As the mind of man can conceive and believe, he can achieve.
Right.
Jamie, how about you?
Just enjoy it. You're on for the ride, so hang on and enjoy it.
Great. Thank you both very much for being on the show. I'm sure I enjoyed it. I'm sure I enjoyed it, and I'm sure our audience enjoyed it also. Again, thanks so much. And thank you for watching One World. If you've got comments or concerns or would like to know more about our guests or what else you can do or more about what's going on, please give us a call, 602-264-0986, or drop us a line, care of One World, P.O. Box 32035, Phoenix, Arizona, 85064. Again, thanks for watching One World. I'm Bruce Benefiel, also known as Zendor. Namaste.